All right, so uh, let's dive into this whole world of generative AI, and especially its impact on education and research. You've given us so much to dig into, including some excerpts from UNESCO's 2023 guidance on generative AI. It seems like you're really interested in not just what Gen AI us,
Yeah.
like all the algorithms and those catchy names like ChatGPT, but also the so what? Like, why does all this matter?
Yeah, it's fascinating. This tech is really pushing the limits of what we even thought was possible. It's not just, automating a few tasks here and there. It's really making us rethink the very core of how we learn and make new discoveries.
Totally. Totally. So to start off, can we just maybe take a step back and just clarify what exactly IS generative AI? It's more than just a really good Google search, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Think of it this way. Instead of just, retrieving information that's already out there, Gen AI actually creates something totally new. Text, images, even music. It's like having this superpowered mimic that learns from all this data it's been trained on.
Okay. That makes sense. And we hear all these terms like LLMs and GPTs. Are those the brains behind all this mimicry?
You got it. LLMs, or large language models, are trained on these huge data sets of text and code. And they're the foundation for tools like ChatGPT that everybody's using. Now, GPTs, or generative pre-trained transformers, are a specific type of LLM that have really become super popular. Remember hearing about GPT-3 and GPT-4 with all those crazy parameters, like billions and trillions of parameters? Each one of those is helping the model fine-tune its performance.
So the more parameters,
Yeah.
the more sophisticated the model,
Yeah.
and the more impressive the output, I guess.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And it's not just about language anymore either. GPT-4, for example, is what we call multimodal, meaning it can understand images too. So instead of just, text, we might start seeing more and more AI tools that can actually analyze images and respond to that visual information too. Some experts even think that foundation model is a more accurate term than large language model at this point.
Wow. That really is a game changer. It almost feels like magic. But I'm guessing there's a lot of, complex technology happening in the background. How does this all actually work?
Okay, well, let's start with text-based Gen AI. So imagine you give it a prompt, like a question or a task. The model actually breaks that down into smaller pieces and starts predicting what words or phrases would logically come next based on all the data it's learned from it, filters for anything offensive, and then just keeps repeating this process, refining its output until it gets to a coherent response.
So it's like it's having a conversation with itself, constantly revising until it gets to the best answer.
Exactly. Now, image generation, that's a bit different. It often uses what's called a generative adversarial network, or GAN for short. Imagine two AIs kind of battling it out. One creates an image, and the other AI is trying to figure out if it's real or fake. And this back and forth competition is what pushes the generator to make these really realistic images.
That's amazing. It's like a constant game of one-upmanship that leads to these super realistic images. I've also heard this term, prompt engineering. Does that have something to do with how we interact with these models?
It does. Writing the right prompt is really important to getting the results you want from the AI. It's kind of like learning to speak the language of AI. You have to be specific, clear, and use the right keywords to guide the AI to what you're trying to get it to do.
So it's not just about asking any question. It's about asking the right question.
Yeah.
In the right way. You could even say it's an art form.
Absolutely. There's a real skill to it. Some people are even building careers out of being prompt engineers.
Now, shifting gears a bit, there's also this thing called EdGPT, which is this specialized Gen AI, trained just for education. What can you tell us about that?
EdGPT is super interesting. It's being trained on huge amounts of educational content. Imagine a world with personalized tutoring, AI giving you feedback on your assignments, even AI tools that help you learn new languages or skills. It has the potential to totally change how we learn.
Yeah, it sounds like a totally personalized learning experience.
Yeah.
Tailored to your individual needs and goals.
Exactly. And that brings us to a really important point. The potential of this technology is huge, but it's not without its challenges.
Yeah, every shiny new technology comes with its own set of hurdles. What are some of the things we need to watch out for when it comes to Gen AI?
Let me think. Well, one of the biggest concerns is misuse. Imagine someone using Gen AI to create information that's convincing, but totally false. It's like that old saying, a lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes. But with Gen AI, that spread of misinformation could happen even faster and become much more widespread.
That is kind of a scary thought. So how do we combat something like that? Is it even possible to control something this powerful?
It's definitely a complex issue, but there are definitely things we can do. For one, we need to educate people about how Gen AI can be misused and help them develop critical thinking skills so they can spot fake or misleading content. It's all about empowering people to be smart consumers of information, no matter where it's coming from.
So media literacy is going to be even more important now in this age of Gen AI.
Yeah.
What about the people and organizations that are actually developing these AI tools? Do they have responsibility to make sure they're used ethically?
Absolutely. Transparency is key here. Developers need to be upfront about how they're training their models, what data they're using, and what steps they're taking to minimize any potential risks.
It sounds like accountability
Yeah.
and open communication are going to be critical for building trust in these technologies. Now, you mentioned earlier that Gen AI is impacting not just education, but research as well. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, research is going through some pretty big changes right now, all thanks to Gen AI. Imagine a tool that can go through tons of data in seconds and find patterns and connections that would take humans years to discover. That's the power of Gen AI in research.
That's amazing. So it's like a super-powered research assistant.
Exactly. And it can even go beyond just analyzing data. Some researchers are using Gen AI to help them come up with new hypotheses, design experiments, even write parts of their research papers.
Wow, AI writing research papers.
Yeah.
That brings up some interesting questions. What about plagiarism, for example? And who gets credit for the work? The AI or the researcher using it?
Those are some really big questions, both ethical and practical, that are being debated right now. It's really going to force academia to rethink things like what it means to be an author and how we protect intellectual property.
It sounds like Gen AI is really going to force academia to evolve and adapt to this new world. Now, speaking of adaptation, there's been a lot of talk about the skills people are going to need to thrive in a world where Gen AI is becoming more and more common. What are your thoughts on that?
I think one of the most important skills will be AI literacy. Basically understanding what AI is, how it works, what it can and can't do. It's not just for computer scientists anymore. Everyone needs a basic understanding of AI to navigate this new world.
It's kind of like how everyone needs basic computer skills these days.
Yeah.
To get by in the digital age.
Yeah.
Now, beyond just understanding AI, what other skills will be important?
Well, critical thinking will be more crucial than ever. With Gen AI able to create such convincing content, being able to tell fact from fiction, to really evaluate information carefully is going to be super important.
So it's not just about blindly accepting what an AI spits out. It's about questioning it, analyzing it, and verifying the information.
Exactly. And along with critical thinking, creativity is going to be a really sought-after skill. AI can generate content, but it's still humans who bring the originality, that ability to connect ideas in new ways and think outside the box.
So in a way, AI might actually push us to be even more creative.
That's the hope. It's about using AI to help us do even more, not to replace us completely.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, I know UNESCO has released some guidelines on how to responsibly use Gen AI in education. What are some of the key things they're saying?
Well, UNESCO is really pushing for a human-centered approach,
Right.
where the focus is on how AI can empower learners and teachers, not replace them. They also stress how important it is to be inclusive and make sure that everyone has equal access to this technology and all the benefits it brings.
So making sure that no one is left behind just because they don't have the same opportunities or resources.
Yeah.
What are some specific ways that Gen AI can be used effectively in classrooms?
One exciting use is personalized learning. Imagine an AI tutor that can adapt to each student's individual needs and give them personalized instruction and support.
It's like having a personal tutor for every student. That could be huge for education.
Absolutely. And Gen AI can also be used for assessment. Instead of just using standardized tests, we can use AI to create more dynamic and personalized assessments that actually measure what students really understand.
It sounds like Gen AI has the potential to make learning more engaging, more effective, and more tailored to each student's needs. But just like with any new technology, there will be some bumps in the road. What are some of the things we need to be careful about as we start integrating Gen AI into education?
One thing to watch out for is becoming too reliant on AI. It's a powerful tool, but it's important to remember that AI can't replace human teachers, the human connection, the empathy, the ability to inspire students. Those are all things AI just can't do.
So it's about finding that balance, using AI to help teachers be even better, not trying to replace them altogether.
Exactly. And another challenge is making sure that AI is used fairly in education and doesn't make existing inequalities worse.
You're talking about the digital divide again.
Yeah, exactly. Access to technology
Mm-hmm.
and digital literacy skills are not the same for everyone, and we need to make sure that Gen AI in education doesn't leave anyone behind.
So it's about making sure that everyone have the opportunity to benefit from this technology, regardless of their background or where they live. Now, we've been focusing a lot on education, but Gen AI is also having a big impact on the world of work. Can you touch on that a bit before we wrap up?
Sure. Gen AI is already changing how a lot of jobs are done. Repetitive tasks are being automated, new types of jobs are being created, and the skills needed for many existing jobs are changing too.
So we're seeing a shift in the job market, with some jobs disappearing and others being created, all thanks to Gen AI.
Exactly. It's really important for people to be aware of these changes.
Yeah.
And to learn new skills, to adapt.
It's all about lifelong learning, constantly upskilling and reskilling to stay ahead of the curve in this job market. What advice would you give to someone who wants to be prepared for this future of work in the age of Gen AI?
Embrace lifelong learning, stay curious, be open to experimenting with new technologies, and focus on developing those transferable skills like critical thinking, problem solving, and communication.
So it's not just about technical skills. It's about those fundamental human skills.
Yeah.
That will always be valuable.
You got it.
Well, this has been a really interesting conversation. I feel like I've learned a lot, and I'm sure our listeners have too. Any last words of wisdom before we wrap things up?
Just one. Stay curious. This is a field that's constantly evolving, so keep learning, keep exploring, and don't be afraid to ask questions. The future of Gen AI is in our hands, and it's up to all of us to shape it in a way that benefits everyone.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. I'm sure we'll be talking more about Gen AI soon as it continues to evolve. To our listeners, thanks for tuning in. I hope this conversation has sparked your curiosity and giving you a better understanding of this incredible technology. Remember, the future is what we make it. So stay engaged, stay informed, and keep learning. Thanks again for listening.
And that brings us to a really important point. This technology has so much potential, but it's not perfect. There are definitely challenges that come with it.
You're right. Every new technology has its downsides. What are some of the things we need to be cautious about when it comes to Gen AI?
Well, one of the biggest concerns is the potential for misuse. You know, imagine someone using Gen AI to create information that sounds totally convincing, but is actually completely false. It's like that saying, a lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting on its shoes. But with Gen AI, the spread of misinformation could be even faster and wider.
That's a scary thought. So how can we even try to combat that? Is it even possible to control something this powerful?
It's a tough question. It's definitely complicated. But there are things we can do. For starters, we need to educate people about the potential for misuse and help them develop those critical thinking skills so they can spot fake content. It's all about empowering people to be more discerning, to be more skeptical, no matter what they're reading or watching.
So media literacy is even more important than ever now in this age of Gen AI. What about the people and organizations actually building these AI tools? Do they have a responsibility to make sure they're used ethically?
Absolutely. I think transparency is key here. Developers need to be upfront about how their models are trained, what data is used, and what steps they're taking to mitigate those potential risks.
Sounds like accountability and open communication are crucial for building trust. Now, you mentioned earlier that Gen AI isn't just impacting education, it's impacting research as well. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, research is going through a pretty radical shift right now, thanks to Gen AI. Just imagine a tool that can sift through mountains of data in seconds, finding patterns and connections that would take humans years and years to discover. That's the power of Gen AI.
That's wild. So it's like having a superpowered research assistant.
Exactly. And it's not just data analysis. Some researchers are using Gen AI to help them formulate their hypotheses, to design experiments, even to write sections of their research papers.
Wow. AI actually writing research papers. That brings up some interesting questions. What about things like plagiarism? Who actually gets credit for the work, the AI or the researcher using it?
Those are some of the big questions everyone is grappling with right now, both ethically and practically. It's going to force the academic world to rethink some fundamental things, like authorship and intellectual property.
It sounds like academia is going to have to evolve pretty quickly to keep up with this new landscape. And speaking of adapting, there's been so much talk about the skills people are going to need to thrive in a world where Gen AI is everywhere. What are your thoughts?
One of the most important skills is going to be AI literacy. Basically understanding what AI is, how it works, what it can and can't do, and what its limitations are. It's not just for computer scientists anymore. Everyone needs to have at least a basic understanding of AI.
It's like needing those basic computer skills these days.
Yeah.
To navigate the digital world. What other skills do you think are going to be important?
Critical thinking is going to be more crucial than ever because AI can create such convincing content. People need to be able to tell what's real and what's fake, to analyze information carefully, and not just accept everything they see.
So it's not about just blindly trusting what AI tells us. It's about asking the right questions.
Exactly. And along with critical thinking, I think creativity is going to be a really important skill. AI can create content, but it's still humans who bring the originality, that ability to connect ideas in new ways, that ability to think outside the box.
So in a way, AI might actually push us to be even more creative.
Yeah, I think that's a real possibility. It's all about using AI to enhance our human abilities, not to replace us.
That makes sense. Now, I know UNESCO has come out with some guidelines on the ethical use of Gen AI in education. Can you give us a quick overview of some of their key points?
Sure. UNESCO is really pushing for a human-centered approach, where the focus is on how Gen AI can help learners and teachers, not replace them. They also emphasize the importance of inclusivity, making sure everyone has access to the technology and its benefits.
So it's about making sure no one is left behind. What are some specific ways Gen AI can be used effectively in classrooms?
Personalized learning is a big one. Imagine having an AI tutor that adapts to each student's learning style and pace and provides customized instruction and support.
It's like having a personal tutor for every student.
Exactly. Gen AI can also be really useful for assessment. Instead of relying only on standardized tests, we could use AI to create more dynamic and personalized assessments that give us a better picture of what students really understand.
It sounds like Gen AI has the potential to make learning more engaging and more effective for every student. But like with any new technology, there will be challenges along the way. What are some things we should be mindful of as we start to integrate Gen AI into education?
I think one of the big things is to be careful about over-reliance on AI. It's a powerful tool, but it's important to remember that AI is not a substitute for human teachers, that human connection, that empathy, the ability to inspire students. Those are things that AI just can't replicate.
So it's about finding the right balance. Using AI to help teachers be more effective, not trying to replace them altogether.
Exactly. And another challenge is making sure the use of AI in education is equitable and that it doesn't worsen existing inequalities.
You're talking about the digital divide.
Yes. Access to technology and the internet.
Yeah.
And digital literacy skills.
Yeah.
Very widely. And we have to make sure that Gen AI in education doesn't leave certain students behind.
It's about ensuring that everyone benefits, regardless of their background or where they live. We've been focusing on education. But I know Gen AI is also having a huge impact on the world of work. Can you talk about that a bit before we wrap up?
Of course. Gen AI is already changing the way a lot of jobs are done. We're seeing more automation of routine tasks, the emergence of completely new roles, and a shift in the skills needed for many existing jobs.
So it sounds like the job market is changing rapidly, with some jobs becoming obsolete and new jobs being created.
Exactly. It's crucial for people to be aware of these changes and to adapt their skills accordingly.
So it's all about lifelong learning, constantly upskilling and reskilling to stay competitive. What advice would you give to someone who's thinking about the future of work in the age of Gen AI?
My advice would be to stay curious, be open to new technologies, and focus on developing those transferable skills like critical thinking, problem solving, and communication.
Those core human skills that are always in demand. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. I feel like I've learned so much, and I'm sure our listeners have too. Any final words of wisdom before we wrap things up?
My final thought would be to encourage everyone to stay engaged. This field is constantly changing, so stay informed, keep learning, and don't be afraid to ask questions. The future of Gen AI is in our hands, and it's up to all of us to shape it responsibly.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining me for this deep dive. I'm sure we'll be talking more about Gen AI as it continues to evolve. To our listeners, thanks for tuning in. We hope this conversation has given you a better understanding of this incredible technology and its potential impact on our world. Remember, the future is what we make it. So stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged. Thanks for listening.
And that brings us to a really important point. This technology has so much potential, but it's not perfect. There are definitely challenges.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah.
But also kind of daunting at the same time.
Yeah. It's like we're on the edge of this whole new frontier, full of possibilities, but also a lot of uncertainty. It reminds me of when the internet first came out. No one could have predicted how much it would change everything.
That's a good point. So with everything we've talked about today, what's the one thing you'd want our listeners to take away from all this?
I think the most important thing to remember is that Gen AI is a tool. And just like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad. It really all comes down to the choices we make, both individually and as a society.
So it's not about the technology itself. It's about how we decide to use it.
Exactly. That's why it's so important for everyone to be informed, to be part of these conversations, and to think critically about the implications of this technology.
Right. We can't just sit back and watch it happen.
Exactly. This is a conversation that everyone needs to be a part of, from the people making policies and developing the technology to educators, students, and everyday people. We all have a role to play.
So what do you think the next few years hold for Gen AI?
Well, one thing I'm pretty sure of is that this innovation is only going to speed up. We'll probably see even more powerful AI models that can do even more incredible things.
So what we're seeing now is just the beginning.
I think so. We're still in the very early stages of this whole thing. It's kind of like we just discovered fire, and we're still figuring out how to use it.
That's exciting, but also a little scary.
For sure. But I'm optimistic. I think we can harness the power of Gen AI for good. I think we can use it to tackle some of the world's biggest problems, like climate change and disease and poverty.
That's a hopeful thought. But it also sounds like it's going to take a lot of careful thought and ethical decision-making.
Definitely. We have to be aware of the potential downsides of Gen AI, like what happens when jobs are displaced, and how to stop the spread of misinformation. We need to make sure that this technology is used to benefit all of humanity.
It sounds like we need a good mix of technological advancements, ethical awareness, and social responsibility to make this work. Well, this has been a really insightful look at Gen AI. I've learned so much, and I hope our listeners have too. Any final thoughts?
Just this. Stay curious. This field is changing so fast. So keep learning, keep exploring, and keep asking those questions. The future of Gen AI is in our hands. It's up to us to shape it in a way that benefits everyone.
That's a great way to put it. Thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive. It's been a pleasure. And to all our listeners, thank you for tuning in. I hope you found this conversation as thought-provoking as I have. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a different topic. But until then, keep those brains buzzing, stay curious, and we'll see you next time.